So we've gotten to my second favorite prompt in the entire FuckAthon, and for those that don't know, the FuckAthon is a month-long readathon that I created and will be hosting from the 1st to the 31st of July, whereby we pick topics that center around issues that matter to us and basically read books that like feature these topics and talk about them. Now this entire series, the recommended read series, has been basically me picking 20 books that feature each of these prompts and just recommend some books that fit it, just so you can see how diverse, you know, the prompts are. So we've done Fuck Racism, whereby we are going to read books that examine race relations. We've done the Fuck the Patriarchy, whereby we basically read books that involve people standing up against patriarchal norms and traditions. We've also done the Fuck Ageism prompts, whereby we read books that feature older characters as main characters. We've also done the Fuck Heternormativity prompts, which basically is about reading books that are queer as fuck. And now this is the Fuck Realism prompt, where we're basically reading books that have a bit of fantasy in them. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
To be talking to you, Belladonna. Should have taken a break, not an Oxford comma. Take what I want when I wanna, and I want you.
Hello everybody, Nora back again. So yeah, I'll just go straight to my recommended reads. I like to state one that I've not read all these books. I actually did remove a lot of the books I've read, or at least some of the books I've read, just so that I can have a bit of variety. And also I did not include any of the OG fantasy books in this, just because like these are either books people have read or have plans on reading, so I didn't think there was a need to include them in it. So there will be no Lord of the Rings trilogy, because that is the OG fantasy book. You know, there will be no Lord of the Rings, there will be no Game of Thrones, there will be no Harry Potter, there's no Golden Compass, there's no Chronicles of Narnia, there is no Percy Jackson, there's no Mist of Avalon, there is no Name of the Wind, there is no Aragon, there's no Mistborn. So basically your OG fantasy books are not here, just because I wanted to include other fantasy books that, you know, some of you might have heard of, some of you might not have heard of, some of you might have had on your TBR list, and this is a good time to incorporate them into the prompt. Now the very first book on my list is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Now if you spent any amount of time on my channel, you'll know that this book will definitely make the list, and it will be #1, just because one, this was my favorite book of 2018. It's still one of my favorite books ever. I love it, I adore it. This is a grim dark fantasy novel that basically, where in this world there is no clear-cut right or wrong. The person who is right, the person who succeeds, is the one that has power. And our lead protagonist, Rin Fangrunin, is as powerful as they come, because she's bound to the fiery phoenix god, who basically wants to use her to set our whole world on fire and basically leave it a rubble of death and destruction. And when you combine the Phoenix God's thirst for blood and destruction and Rin's own thirst for vengeance, because of the things that, the horrible mess of a thing that has happened to our country as a result of war. Like, this book does not shy away from the horrors and dangers of war. Like, you see it vividly in full color, and it terrifies you, because this is someone that has such immense power, living in a world that is so traumatized and brutalized that you can kind of justify what it is that she's doing, even though you are horrified at the thought of what it is that she's doing. And Rin would always be my bae. I love her, I adore her. Now a lot of people actually wrongfully categorize this as YA, which is always surprising to me, because this is definitely new adult, if not just because of the fact that it is very violent and very vivid, but also because even though it is that Rin in this book starts off in your, like, the way your typical YA protagonist starts off in books, in the sense that she comes from an impoverished background, she's an orphan, she gets an opportunity of a lifetime to train at an elite fighting school and discovers latent powers that she never knew she had. Like, that is the storyline, the plot for a lot of YA novels, but this book definitely takes a very different, very dark direction, and that is the reason why it is definitely one of my favorite books, and I would always recommend it. Next is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Now this book takes place in 18th century Cairo, where we meet our lead protagonist, Nari. She's a thief and a con artist who is basically trying to, you know, make a living, and one day accidentally stumbles onto powers that should have been best left alone, and is soon on the run from, you know, Ifrit and mythical air beings the size of forests, you know, and basically is running with a jinn as fast as she can, with time running fast against her, to the city of Brass, Devabad, because there she believes lies the key and answers to her ancestry and the power that she has. But when she gets to Devabad, she has to face a whole new set of dangers, mainly the political intrigue and machinations that make up the entire world, and Nari has to use her wit and her smarts to stay ahead of it all. S.A. Chakraborty carves us this beautiful, fantastical, mythical region inspired by the myth and folklore of the Middle East, and it's an own voices novel. So you have S.A. Chakraborty, who is a Muslim, and one of the main characters in the novel is also a Muslim. And she tells us a story rooted in Middle Eastern mythology with a world that is as fast and different and confusing, and a heroine who is smart and cunning and does not get enough credit because she's surrounded by quite a lot of idiotic jinn who keep trying to define a life for her. Now, I'm gonna warn you, this book, yes, mythical, is beautiful, but it also has a very, very, very slow start. So brace yourself, because half of the book, it's almost like nothing happens, but when it does pick up, it's like fast rush to the very end. So totally recommend. Next is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Now, this is a book that is very polarizing in that the people that love it with the passion of like 1,000 blazing suns, and the people that hate it to the very depths of their being. But if it is that you love stories of magic and wonder set against the backdrop of the circus, with a romance at the heart of it and non-linear storytelling, then this might just be the book for you. Now, what is The Night Circus about? It's basically this several years long competition between two magicians, Celia and Marco, who basically have no idea who their competitor is or the reason for the competition for which they've been training their whole life. It's definitely magical realism, definitely on the list of books I want to read. I've wanted to read it forever, and I sincerely hope I'm one of the people that love it with the passion of 1,000 blazing suns. And speaking of loving a book with the passion of 1,000 blazing suns, the next book on the list is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, which is the first book in the Gentleman Bastard series and is perfect for fans of Libadugo's Six of Crows. Now, the entire book takes place on the island of Camor, where if you're an orphan, then you know that your lifespan is pretty short. If that reminds you of Ketterdam and by extension Six of Crows, where a certain young orphan that you know owns a heart lived, then yes, you are absolutely right. Just like Six of Crows, The Lies of Locke Lamora has an orphan as a main character. Just like Six of Crows, he learns the fine art of stealing and con artistry. And just like Six of Crows, he recruits a band of light-fingered people to, you know, join his gang. And just like Six of Crows, there's a big heist that they are all planning for. Now, did I just make the number 4 on my list a symbiosis of Six of Crows and Lies of Locke Lamora? Yes. So what is the takeaway from all of this? Read Six of Crows and read The Lies of Locke Lamora. Thank you very much. Now, I forgot to mention it, but City of Brass actually does also fulfill the fuck racism prompt, because there are various Deva races, and this book does delve into, you know, the relationship among the different races and the strain that arises as a result of it. There's also a bit of fuck classism in it, because due to the racial structure, there is a bit of classism in Devabad. Also, the Lies of Locke Lamora also does feature a bit of fuck classism as well. Now, on to number 5 on the list, and that is Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. Now, this is an own voices novel where most of the world has drowned, and in the newly resurrected Dinete being the former Navajo reservation, monsters walk freely amongst the earth. Enter Maggie, a gifted killer and a Dinete monster hunter in a world where monsters abound. Darkness is fast encroaching, and she has to team up with Kai Aviso, an unconventional medicine man, to unravel the clues they need to save their world. Now, just like the Poppy War, a lot of people sometimes, I don't know why, but they actually shelve this under YA when this is clearly adult fantasy. Like, things get really bloody, really violent, really fast, and this book is also really, really dark. But if that is your jam, then this is the book for you. The Trail of Lightning also does fulfill the fuck, pollution, and fuck classism prompts as well. Next is The Magicians by Lev Grossman, which is basically about a bunch of university students who go to an elite magic school, and they learn that 1, magic does not equate happiness, 2, that magic comes from pain, and 3, that magic is a clusterfuck that will take you on the weirdest adventures. It's basically a cross between Harry Potter and the Chronicles of Narnia, but with way more booze, way more sex, and way more violence, and characters that might be adults but prove that being older does not necessarily mean being wiser, and also proving the fact that you can have main characters that you really can't stand. So why is this book on my list? Well, because because the TV show it's based off of. That's The Magician on Sci-Fi. He's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Next is Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor, and this is a story of Onye Suonwu, a child born of Nuru and Okeke origins and born of rape. And because of that, it's quite visible. She wears the brutality that led to her birth, her conception, and her birth cleanly on her features in a world where you are either Okeke or Nuru, and if you're both, then everybody can clearly and visibly see that you're a child of rape. She's also in possession of immense power. She can travel through time, she can raise the dead, she can change the future, she can rewrite the future, she can shapeshift, and has to train with a shaman to own her powers, because ultimately Onye Suonwu has quite the important destiny. You see, it's up to her to stop the genocide of her people, and it's set in this post-apocalyptic African world, and it's just fantastic. It's an amazing book. I read it, I loved it. I did have some problems with the insta love type romance in it, but it is a solid fantasy book, and it also fulfills the fuck racism and fuck the patriarchy prompts as well. Next is Throne of the Crescent Moon by Saladin Ahmed, which is set in the Middle East during the age of the Caliphate and is rooted in Middle Eastern folklore and mythology. Now, in a land filled with jinn and ghouls, there arises a band of unexpected heroes to save the day. The first is Dr. Abdullah Maxlud, who is the last real ghoul hunter in the city and is currently over 60. Would rather prefer that he's left alone to drink his favorite tea and eat all the sweets he can. Second is Rashid Bar Rashid, who is Dr. Abdullah's apprentice, a man who is as powerful as he is pious. And finally, we have Zamia Badawi, who has the power, who can shapeshift into a lion, and is shunned by an entire tribe for taking on a title that is primarily taken up by men. Now, these three have to come together when there is a rise in indiscriminate killings by the monsters that roam all over their city, even as the entire kingdom rests on the brink of a civil unrest. Now, this book fulfills both the fuck ageism and the fuck the patriarchy prompt as well. Next is The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. What can I say? I'm going to always bring this book when I'm recommending fantasy series, just because this is the book that started my love for this entire series, and I love it so much. It's a love story between an angel and a demon, and also a questioning of who deserves that term. Are all angels inherently good? Are all demons automatically bad? And this is all set against the backdrop of the beautiful city of Prague, as we seek to answer the ageless question: just how does one end a war? And also, can a mass murderer find redemption? Now, I'm not going to go into full details as to what this book is about. I think this is a book that is best if you walk in blind. Like, don't even read the description on Goodreads. Just enter this book blind and get ready to be blown your socks away, because Laini Taylor has this way of creating really vivid, magical, beautiful worlds, and I totally would always recommend this series. Next up is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett, where once again we have a thief. What can I say? I have a soft spot for assassins, fae, and thieves in that order, although there's really I have a soft spot for a lot of things. You'll find out eventually as we keep talking about my taste in books. But basically, I have a soft spot for thieves. Our thief, Sansia, basically is given an assignment, which is for her to steal a box, a pretty small, unassuming box from this heavily locked up vault. Except for the fact that breaking into the vault is pretty easy for Sansia, because she does have the magical abilities that make her the best safe cracker in the entire city. What is not so easy is the fact that one of the leaders of the merchant houses that rule our entire city is after her life just because of the box she stole. And unfortunately, he is so powerful and there's nobody that can stop him, which means that Sansia has to be on the run and has to find allies and also find a way to tap into the power of the box, the mythical mystery box that she's holding, and also embrace the transformation that merging with that power in turn brings. It's pretty cool. The magic system sounds fucking amazing, and I cannot wait to read that book. Next up is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of problems with this book, starting from the characterization, the not so believable relationship development between the characters, the messy and plodding plots, and the fact that Tomi did not give us the sapphic relationship we deserved between Amari and Zelie. But the reason why I'm including this is because very few YA books, if any, actually build worlds that are based off of Yoruba culture and tradition and religion. Although, not gonna lie, if you know anything about Nigerian Yoruba culture, you will see the gaps in the story, in fact about Nigeria as a whole, because even down to the naming of the states and the maps, you will see a lot of questions and you'll be like, seriously. But like I said, I'm including this because this is a world filled with magic and wonder and quite rich in imagination. And it just occurred to me that I've been talking about this and I actually have not gotten around to what this book is about. This book basically tells the story of Zelie, a magi who lives in a country where magic has died and the king has slaughtered every magi he can find. And now Zelie has the opportunity of a lifetime, which is to restore magic to our downtrodden people, with the king's daughter Amari on her side and the king's son and Amari's brother Inan on their heels. Next is A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Now what can I say? I love books, and I think anybody that loves books, that loves libraries, would love this book, because this book is all about people eating grimoires, like grimoires that can eat people, and libraries that are as vast with so much books, and a girl, Elizabeth, who was raised deep in the depths of the library and has worked there and lived there all her life, and is caught in a conspiracy because one of their very deadly grimoires goes missing and she's accused of being a part of the conspiracy, and Elizabeth has to pair up with the sorcerer Nathaniel to clear her name. The only thing about it is that Nathaniel is a sorcerer and Elizabeth all her life has been raised to believe and see sorcerers as evil. So you have these enemies to lovers filled with libraries and books that can eat people and lots of magic and wonder, and like, is anybody surprised that this book made this list? Also because Margaret Rogerson wrote a book, one of my very favorite fae books, that's An Enchantment of Ravens. I know not a lot of people love it because one, they believe that the book is too small and that she didn't flesh things out, and I've seen A Sorcery of Thorns. That book is big, which makes me very happy, and I cannot wait to read it because yes please. Next up is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Now what can I say? This is a book about magic, about a young woman with a thirst to see the world, about sorcerers that can jump across worlds, about smugglers and power-hungry villains, and a world building that would leave you gaping and wishing that you lived in one of two Londons: red London teeming with magic and light, or white London if you have the stomach for it and are willing to fight tooth and nail to survive. And it's the first in a series. Actually, a lot of the books I picked up are first in series, which I repeat, if you all know me, you know how much I love series. Like, I love the fact that books are not really standalone. I think the only book that is a standalone out of all the books I've mentioned so far is The Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Every other book in this I've been mentioning are all parts of series, and that is what makes me happy. And this book definitely makes me happy, and I would always recommend it because I loved it so much. Next up is Shadowshaper by Daniel Jose Alder, which is an urban fantasy YA novel about Sierra Santiago, an Afro-Latinx graffiti artist who discovers that she has the ability to imbue power into graffiti murals and use it to basically communicate with spirits. However, she and other shadow shapers like herself are being hunted one at a time by a man who has discovered their abilities, who can use their abilities, and who wants to be the only shadow shaper left in the world. It sounds magical, it sounds thrilling, it's set in New York. I cannot wait to read it and look at it. Like, isn't that girl gorgeous? Isn't she so pretty? I love the play of colors in her hair. Like, it's a gorgeous book. I can't wait to read it. Next is The Cruel Prince by Ollie Black. Like I said earlier, I have a weakness for face stories, but what I didn't say earlier is that I also have a weakness for anti-heroes, especially if my anti-heroes are women with a thirst for vengeance and or power and a willingness to go to the very ends of the earth in order to achieve what it is that they desire. And that is what we get with my girl Jude Duarte, whose parents were killed when she was really young, and she, her twin sister Taryn and her elder sister Vivienne were all taken to Elfheim, which is the fairyland, by Maddox, the general, and our mother's former husband and Vivienne's father, who killed her parents and felt and was honorable enough to take the kids with him to the land of the Fae. And now they've spent 10 years there. Jude has gotten used to that life, and now she wants it to be seen and respected. But that is hard when you live in a country where Fae, where humans are just basically prey to the Fae, and she has to consistently stand for herself and fight back, especially against the Prince of Elfheim, Carden, who hates humans and seems to especially hate Jude. Or does he? Does he really? Does he really? Jude. Like, if you read the book, you understand the scene I'm talking about. But anyway, one of my favorite books. I love this book. Jude is unapologetically the anti-hero of my dreams, and you find yourself either loving her and rooting for her or hating her. Whichever the case may be, she does evoke some pretty strong emotions in people. Next up is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, which is inspired by a Russian fairy tale, and is filled with Russian folklore and myths, and is basically magical and beautiful and mythical and just utter perfection. Now, this book basically tells the story of Vasya, our protagonist, who is raised deep in the wilderness of Russia, on Russian folktales and stories of the beings that dwell in their midst, taking care of their homes, protecting their crops, and basically rewarding the people for believing in them and, you know, taking care of them. But then Vasya's mother dies and her father has to remarry, and a new stepmother is very religious, very devout, and very pious, and is very intent on removing all superstitious belief in the town. And slowly the townspeople stop believing, especially due to the help of the priests, the sanctimonious, hypocritical priest that comes to their town and uses fear to get them to turn away from their old beliefs. And Vasya is the only one that stands firmly in believing in the old tradition and old ways, and is also aware of the darkness that is slowly creeping onto their town. Now, it's, like I said, it's a pretty magical, mythical book, and it also fulfills the fuck the patriarchy prompt. Next is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, which is basically a spin/retelling of the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin, but with a more feminist bent to it, because this story stars 3 separate women at the heart and core of it, and each one of them ultimately gets to the point where they take control of their lives and fight back against systems that would rather have them subservient. So technically, the book also fulfills the fuck the patriarchy prompt and also fulfills the fuck racism prompt, because there is a practicing Jewish character present in the book. Next is Halfway to the Grave by Jeannie Frost. Now, this is for fans of Spike. If Spike gets the girl and lives to, you know, have a happy ever after with said girl. It's the story of Kat, our protagonist, who is half vampire and is basically on the prowl, hunting the undead, hoping against hope that she would finally run into a deadbeat vampire father. But then she runs into this vampire bounty hunter Bones and pairs up with him, and, you know, he starts to train her so that she's faster, even more deadlier than he is. And all the while he's training her, they are looking for her father, but as they hunt, they are in turn hunted, and Kat has to finally decide where her loyalties are and if she can truly trust Bones. Apparently, it's filled with hot, smexy, sexy times. It's of course it's a paranormal urban fantasy novel, and also a book I've read like the first 2 books in the series. Really hot, really good, and I need to catch up on the rest of the series because I think there are like 7 books in it. I think so, not sure, but yeah, definitely behind. I totally should pick that up soon. Next is Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. Now, I'm not gonna lie, TOG is the weakest book in the link. Like, this is the start of the series and it is so slow, and the pacing is not really great. The characters are all over the place. I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite book in the series. But the thing about the Throne of Glass series is that it does get better as the books progress. It gets way much better as we follow Selena Sadothian as she transforms from being a slave to being an assassin to being the king's champion to being, you know, I'm not going to spoil it for you if you've not read the series, but if you are, you know exactly, you know, the trajectory she takes. But I love this series and I love my girl, and that's all I'm going to say about it. So yes, basically that's what the Throne of Glass is about. Selena Sadothian, who used to be a slave, is the most feared assassin in the entire kingdom before she was captured, and now for her to gain her freedom, she has to enter this competition where the king's champion is chosen, and she's basically she's taken out of, you know, the slave mines by the prince and is right-hand man / you know, head of his royal guard. And basically it's all about her fighting other assassins to get the fame spot. It's pretty slow, it's pretty boring, but the entire series picks up by like the end of book 2, like the midpoint of book 2. Things really pick up, and after that there is no going back as far as this series is concerned for me. So yes. And then finally, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. What can I say? I'm Sarah J. Maas trash. I don't care. Look at me not giving a shit. And what can I say? I also love fae stories. So basically the book follows Feyre, a human who is dragged into Prithia, which is fae territory, because she kills a fairy. She kills a fairy who was masquerading as a wolf, and basically to fulfill a part of an oath that humans have had with the fairy whose land borders theirs for centuries. She's dragged into Prithia, and there she eventually falls in love and discovers that she's the secret to breaking a spell that has held the entirety of Feyland trapped for centuries. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is the first book in the series. It's quite slow, very boring, not my thing. Sarah J. Maas tends to do that. It takes her a while to get into her stride and get into series, at least if the two series she's written are anything to go by. But I consider this a very, 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 very long as prologue to, you know, Akomaf, which is when the story really picks up, and that is like my favorite book in the series, and also one of my favorite Sarah J. Maas books ever. I love it. I love Akomaf, but you have to get through this to get to Akomaf. But I love the entire series. After we are done with the mess that is ACOTAR, like, I have to be honest with you, this book not too good. And yep, those are the 20 recommended fantasy books. There are way more books, like, you all know me, my shelf is 3/4 fantasy is my jam. But if I start talking fantasy books, I am going to be here a while. I just hope I was able to give you quite a diverse, you know, selection to choose from if you're still trying to decide exactly what books to pick, and you want to pick books that, you know, fulfill multiple prompts. Some of the books I've mentioned, definitely do so. Let me know, how is your TBR coming? Let me know if you've read any of these fantasy books, or if you plan on reading any of these fantasy books, or if you've read my favorite book of all time, one of my favorite books of all time, The Poppy War. Just let me know. If you like this video, please do not forget to give it a big thumbs up. Check out my other videos, subscribe if you want to. I make new videos every Sundays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and I'll see you soon. Until then, stay passionate, love books, love yourself. Bye.
You are my strange addiction. My doctors can't explain my symptoms or my